Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Get Jashed. Today I'm very happy to have with me Lisa Behan. Lisa is founder and director of Mindsettle, a calming tool used in clinical settings using a combination of tranquil natural images and curated soothing music to help soothe the environment for patients. Lisa is also a workshop facilitator and speaker, artist, and has a long history of working with organizations in order to bring holistic ideas and methods to better people's lives. So, thank you so much for joining me, Lisa. I really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, thanks, Jess. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, my pleasure. So, I'm really interested in your work with Mindsettle. We've had conversations about it before, and I think it's just such a great concept to create and cultivate an environment that is calming and soothing, especially in high stress environments, like clinical settings can be. So I just wanted to ask if you could share and tell us more about your work with Mindsettle and what was the genesis behind it? Like, how did it come about?
Yeah, thanks. There's a few different strands, I guess, but the main genesis when I first started thinking about it was a really good friend of mine. Got diagnosed with cancer, and the prognosis was not great. So in that time, I just decided, well, every week I'm going to spend time with David, and hoping that would make things easier, when he wasn't around anymore. So, as part of that, spending time with him, I would go along to some of his chemotherapy sessions. And it was just such a shock to me because when you walk into those wards, the anxiety is palpable. Like you can't help but take it on yourself as well. And so I was really aware of that and just thought, there must be a way to kind of change this atmosphere a bit. Um, and then a few years later, I was lucky enough to be asked to be an artist in residence with a arts organisation that had a festival every year on Minjerribah, which is also known as North Stradbroke Island. And this was a arts festival that was about nature art. And one year we did a film festival, and all the contributing films were either filmed on the southern Moreton Bay Islands or were artists from that area. One of the films was called Something Amazing, and it was just beautifully shot. It was shot on Minjerribah, so it was just these gentle scenes of nature, the wind blowing through the grass. You could see the breeze rippling on the lakes, that kind of thing. No people, and just set to some really lovely ambient music. And in my mind, it just kind of was that realization that that kind of imagery would be great in those situations of high anxiety, like a chemotherapy ward. And while I was watching that film, I got that same drop of blood pressure and relaxation feeling in my body that I get when I go for a walk in the forest or when I meditate or other contemplative practices. So it was just like, okay, this is the beginnings of an idea. And then I just started researching it and talking to people in health organisations, and found there was a lot of research to back up that kind of intuitive feeling that I had. And so when I was 50, I just thought, okay, let's take a risk and give this a go. So that
I
was the
love
start of it.
that. You kind of just like listen to that voice, but you'd also had it goes to show even though it would have been a challenging experience, the benefits of lived experiences that actually created the inspiration, where you could look around and go, oh, this is kind of not ideal. It doesn't feel good. And while it's not an ideal situation, we can actually create a sense of nurturing and calm within this. So, no, that's an awesome. I love that. I just see that you listened to that voice and you followed it through. And that's kind of that understanding of yourself and understanding what that voice is and how to follow it through just by following the steps instead of trying to get to the end picture as well. So I feel like when we're in creation, when when we try to get to the end picture rather than being with the feeling of it, it makes it a whole lot more difficult. So yeah, well done on that one. Um, with with the tool of Mindsettle, what impact do you think that it's, or have you seen that it's had on the environments that it's used? So,
Yeah,
um,
so one of my early advocates is a woman called Fiona Forrest, and she was in the position of art program director at St Vincent's Hospital, the one in Kangaroo Point and at Northside in Brisbane. She's now moved on to a position with Arts Queensland. But yeah, so we started it out as a art installation at Kangaroo Point, and then a trial, and then eventually Fiona just said, right, this is something that's so useful to our patients who are rehabilitating or our patients who are in palliative care, because it just gives them an option from commercial TV and a way for them to find something restful and peaceful, because often there's a lot of pain or just a lot of time when they find it's difficult to sleep. So yeah, so their patient feedback was really positive, and so that's why they decided to go ahead and be one of my early subscribers, and so far they're still subscribing. And then in dementia care, there's a hospital in Melbourne called St George's in Kew, and they use it in their secure dementia wards. So they find that in that afternoon period called sundowning, when behaviours can get a bit agitated, then this can be a nice soft focus and a way to draw people into that just feeling of a story that really has no narrative. So it's more of a reminiscence. People, you know, can feel themselves being in the forest, and it brings back those ideas of walks when they were young, or they see the ocean and reminisce about a time when they were at the beach with their family. And so it has this lovely gentleness to it that's able to calm that agitation.
yeah. Do you find that, or do you think that it would help with doctors as well? Because I imagine it would help with them even communicating. It might be calming for them, but also if they are then dealing with patients that have had that like calming effect, it might be easier for them to actually communicate in a clearer way to them, where they're heard and what they need to understand is understood a bit better. Do you think that that's the case as well?
I'm not sure. I've so one of the clinics that have it in their waiting room,
Mm.
they commented that everybody likes it. So the staff that work there, the patients, the people who come and do the deliveries. So
Yeah.
you know, it just is that little like moment of peace.
Mm.
I did have, yeah, I actually early on I did have one doctor comment who had it in that waiting room, and that was more neuropsychology or neuropsychiatry, anyway, neuro. Um, and he commented that with his patients, who were mostly children, he would sit in the waiting room with them while they watched it for a little bit, rather than take them straight into the rooms. And he just found that
Mm.
was a nice kind of softer introduction in that way. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it must be. I can only imagine like being a child as well and being in that environment. Like if the doctor would actually come into my world rather than me having to enter directly into theirs, it makes a huge difference in
Mm.
like that's just me imagining how it might feel, but I imagine it would make a huge difference in how it feels in order to actually then step into, like improving health on whatever level it is, depending on the place. But how do you think this kind of approach, like in clinical settings, can lead to changes in how we do health and well-being on a more holistic level?
To me, it's helps in that area of patient-centered care. So it's giving patients more choice over one aspect of their care. Sometimes as a patient, you feel like you're out of control and everybody else is making the decisions. So just that simplicity of, maybe just watching this or putting it onto Mindsettle as a channel gives you the option to just have those moments of calm. And generally, I think something like Mindsettle, I mean, it's just one tool for calm. is a way for us to think more about how we regulate our own emotions and how we need to make space for moments of calm. So with this year, with the dreaded COVID-19, our eldest daughter is studying down in Melbourne, so she's spent a lot of the year in restricted circumstances and sometimes in isolation, and her anxiety has been heightened, like many people's. And so with that, I developed a streaming service, like a version of Mindsettle, but with more micro videos. So these videos are anywhere from 1 to 5 minutes. So they can be used as anxiety breaks or well-being breaks, if you like. So my feedback from my daughter has been that that's certainly been something that's helpful. And I developed 3 films, especially for the Brisbane Mental Health Expo that was just during Mental Health Week.
Yeah.
So this year that forum was mostly online, so those films went up on their Facebook page. And it was interesting to read the feedback from those, that people did have those either moments of calm or moments of connection or moments of reminisce and the places that it took them. So yeah, I'd love in the long term that there would be a menu of so many different types of environments, so you could kind of choose your, I guess, happy place, you would call it, and then that's something that's connected to you, and again gives you more choice and so more agency over your own state of mind.
Yeah, well, that's it, because different calming things work differently for different people. So what might be like one person's happy place would be someone else's nightmare. Like I just think of like the beach, where some people love the beach, but then I think of people that I know that are like, oh, but I hate sand. So, like it's not calming for them as well. Um, I also like that it doesn't have a narrative, and that's why it is so effective. Because I feel like a lot of, especially with anxiety, it's definitely something that we are usually creating stories about. Like we're telling stories, and that's the anxiety. We can be feeling it on a big level, but a lot of the time the mental anxious noise is the stories that we're telling, whether they are as narrative or just as little, snippets of stories and things like that. So I think it's really powerful that, part of how we are able to check in with ourselves doesn't have to have the narrative. It
Yeah.
can just be in stepping into the space as well, which is often more powerful.
Yeah, I thought about that a lot when I was developing it, because a few people that I spoke to along the way said, "Oh, is it going to be like a guided meditation?" And I use those myself, sound meditations, and listen to somebody talking me through. But my feeling was I'd rather have um, music or nature sounds, and also in that way it becomes more international. So not only is there no narrative, but there's no language barriers either. And that can be tricky too, because like happy places, music is very personal too. So what might be ambient music to me might be, dross to you. So, so as I continue to develop, I think the end result will be more nature sounds, although that doesn't suit some clinics. Some clinics actually want almost a constant sound, and nature sounds aren't like that. A bird call comes in and out, or
Yeah.
bubbles away, or that sort of thing. So yeah, it's kind of weighing up those benefits that I can see, but also with what clients want, because that's a nice thing of it being something that is still in its infancy, is that clients can have a direct input into how it's designed. So yeah, I like that customers can help design it as well.
Yeah, that's really cool as well, because again, I like the element, it's giving the element of agency over how you choose to step into space, but then you're giving them further agency by saying, hey, like, this feedback is taken on quite literally in some ways, and we do actually take that into account and create things based on that, in addition to what we're already creating or what we're already planning. I love it. it's just, it feels like a really special space in well-being and wellness, where it is not someone telling you what to do, but someone just holding the space, even if like, you know, you're not the person there, but it's this thing that has been created that holds the space. And I think that's really powerful, especially in years like this year, where we've had a lot of being told what to do, but we've also had a lot of not knowing what to do, because there's so much, you know, uncertainty. We have a lot of narrative around things as well. So um yeah, it's just, I keep like, my mind keeps going into, yeah, that'd be so nice, just step into nature, that I almost have to keep bringing myself back to this conversation. I'm like, oh, because it'd be so good.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, we can, spend our time in nature, but the fact of our modern
Mm,
society is we're hyper connected. We are staying indoors more, and
mm.
people are losing that connection to nature. So there's almost a kind of stealth idea that I have behind this as well is, when you watch it and feel that connection to nature again, the more that you feel that connection to nature, the more you're likely to care about nature. And so there's that sort of environmental
Oh yeah.
advocacy just, bubbling underneath the surface as well. But yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned the whole mental well-being idea, because obviously that's something that's really close to my heart. Um, I really love the words mental fitness, and there's a researcher in the States, Dr. Richard Davidson, and he's quite famous for doing the functional MRIs on Buddhist monks, so that we can
Oh yeah.
see, yeah, what the difference is that meditation can make and how those brains compare to normal brains. Um, and so his idea is that a mental fitness program is something that's so vital. It's a real public health issue, and so his imagining is that in the future, doing something for your mental fitness every day or regularly through the day will be the same, akin to brushing your teeth twice a day. So it will
Hmm.
just become something that we all need. And there's so many of us already, you know, on that path and along there with Richard in these ideas. So yeah, so Mindsettle is something that I see as being one of those mental fitness tools. It might not work for everyone, but that's the thing. If we've got a whole bunch of them for ourselves, then on any given day we can do this, that, or the other. So I have a bunch of contemplative practices that help me. As you know, you're one of my yoga teachers, so I have yoga.
Yeah.
I meditate. I get into a flow state when I make art. So art making is kind of a little art therapy for me. Reading has always been just one of the best things I can do to calm down immediately. So if I get to a
Hmm.
state of being very upset or agitated, then I will grab a book, and that brings me to calm. And I think it's that lifelong reading of books that's also been able to enable me to be in tune with people's emotions, to get that sort of emotional intelligence, and and being able to listen in a really deep way. Um, yeah, so I have that similar aim to be able to do something about mental fitness, or introduce that idea of mental fitness and make it more normal, as normal as it is for us to think about our physical fitness.
Yeah, exactly. Because it is one of those things, and it kind of leads to the next question I want to ask. But it is one of those things that so many people are like, I think it's changing, but there is the sort of the stigma around it. Like, I'll joke with some groups that I work with, because I'll be like, look, we're not getting too woo woo. Everything I'm saying is based on science, just so you know. So when I talk about the breath here, it's not just, because it's a thing, it's because we breathe, and there's a scientific thing that goes on, like physiologically, there is a thing that happens, that kind of thing. So I feel like I'm always, depending on the group, but with specific groups, I'm always like, got this caveat of, oh, this is science, by the way, this is science, just so you know, like, because it's not seen as a normal practice or a normal thing. Like, I think because people can physically see the benefits of physical fitness mostly, generally, but it's harder to measure the benefits of mental fitness. It's
Yes.
so hard. Yeah. So like with that, for people who may not understand the point yet, what would you how would you explain that to people maybe listening who want to know, like, okay, well, why would I do this mindfulness practice? Like, what is the benefit beyond, like, I don't have anxiety, so why would I care about getting connected with nature or myself?
Yeah. So personally for me, the biggest benefit has been able to recognize that there's a space, that there's a gap between an action and my reaction. So, many of us just react to a situation or to something that somebody said. Um, and once you do some sort of contemplative practices over time, you realize that there is this space, and that you don't need to respond, or that you have time to think about those responses. And sometimes my thought process is, if I say this, it will ramp up the situation. Do I want to do this? Yes or no? Sometimes I'll still choose yes and ramp that situation up, and make the perhaps not best choice. But, I've had that space and I have had a bit of a think about it. And I'm just like, right in this moment, actually,
Mm.
yeah,
It's the agency of your response, right? Like, you've
yeah,
still actively chosen it rather than being at the mercy of the reaction itself.
yeah, that's right. And
Mm.
so, and then, as time goes on even more with that space, then you can just, I don't know, it just seems to expand. I mean, there is a neuroscience around it, and I can't remember it now, but it's something like I think it's something like 3 seconds. I can't remember the
Mm.
exact number of seconds,
Yeah.
that actual gap between action and reaction. So it's just interesting to realize that you have, the other thing that I love is all of the research around neuroplasticity. So how the brain continues to grow and change. And to me, as a aging person, that's very empowering, because you don't have to be your brain doesn't have to stay the same; it can change. So we also can control how we change our brain. We can
Yeah.
train our brain in specific ways that leads to better well-being. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's what I
definitely.
that's what I really love.
Yeah, and I also like the fact that, like, if you bring neuroscience into it and you think of like mirror neurons as well, is when you're practicing something and you're experiencing this something within your brain, this space within the reactions, like the more that you actually practice that, and it's science, but I also have experienced it, like, you see people around you just kind of starting to do the same, even if you don't talk about it. If if you're able to have that pause between something happening, and you can go, okay, even if you say it out loud or not, if people witness the pause where you're like, okay, my initial reaction is to do this, but I'm going to sit with that for a moment. It actually creates this same behavior or similar behavior within other people because of the mirror neurons. Like, they witness behavior, so then they can kind of replicate that behavior for themselves, um, which I think is really cool. So I think this has a ripple effect beyond just the person doing it, the person practicing it. Obviously, the more people practicing it, the better for them individually, but also for the ripple effect. But it has a ripple effect because then they interact with people, and then that's felt. And then they interact with people, and then that's felt. Um, but as you were talking as well, there's a quote from Viktor Frankl. He wrote Man's Search for Meaning. I reference it so often, like all over the place, but it's not verbatim, but the quote from him is around, for those who don't know Viktor Frankl, he's an Auschwitz camp survivor. He is a psychologist and in the psychotherapy field. I think he has a few different titles that I can't quite remember exactly, so I'm just going to honor him by saying that. But his quote is around, when we can create the space and distance between stimulus and response, that's where our freedom lies. So when we have the freedom, because then we can actively choose. So as you said, you may still decide to poke the bear, but if you've paused enough even if it doesn't have the greatest outcome, sometimes poking the bear is actually what's needed. But, if you've paused enough and you've considered it and then you've actually chosen rather than just done it, that's freedom in living. That's freedom in how you conduct your life. That's freedom in the choices that you then make and how you then show up for yourself or for other people or with other people as well. So it's just, I think there's a lot of power in that.
That's right. Yeah, there is.
Mm,
And yeah, so reading Viktor Frankl and other Auschwitz survivors, the ones who came out, and that was their way of being able to survive,
mm,
was finding freedom in their mind, that meant that they were not bound by the walls of those concentration camps. Yeah,
mm.
yeah, it's so inspiring to read their works. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. We could keep diving deep into like this science rabbit hole. But I want to ask for you, as far as your own mindfulness practices and that, so bringing it back to you and that self-reflection piece is, where do you feel like you have set up your mindfulness or your mental fitness practices pretty well, where you do it pretty well? And when I say that, I don't mean perfectly because we're human, but like where you feel like you've actually got this pretty good, thing going. Where do you feel like that is for you?
Hmm. Um, Depends on the day. So I always feel good at the end of going to yoga. So that's why I've
Mm,
made that almost a daily practice. So for me, that's very easy. The yoga studio I go to, I can walk to, and it's 5 minutes away. And I do feel like that's a very safe place for me. So
mm.
even if I'm having a bad time, I'll still go along. There might even be some weeping while I'm on the yoga mat, but I feel okay
Oh,
about
it happens. Yep.
that.
Oh, it
But
happens.
that's okay, and to me that's a release, and that's a great place, great that I feel
Mm,
it's safe to be able to release in that place. That's
definitely.
really good. And just lately, a practice that I've been doing, so since the beginning of October, is just making sure that every day I sit and do some art making for about a minimum of some 10 minutes, but often it just leads into 20 minutes or 30 minutes.
Mm,
So yeah, I really enjoy that flow state, so that when I just get into that state of flow, and then I find that there's other ideas flowing and sort of problem solving starts to happen. So that to me is really valuable. Yeah.
yeah,
Um,
I love that. It's interesting what happens when you kind of just step away from the issue for a moment and just let yourself kind of be outside of the think stage and just in it instead. I feel like that's where all the answers come from. It's why we like everyone at some point has had like shower epiphanies, when you're in the shower and you're like, oh, of course, this about something completely irrelevant to you showering.
or walking is a
Or
great
walking.
thing. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So we've got
yeah.
forests nearby, and yeah, so I can just take off and go for a walk. I've got all these different timed walks. It could be a 10-minute walk or a 2 hour
Mm,
or something like that, and then by the
yeah,
time we get back, or at
perfect.
some stage during the walk, there's this just kind of big sigh, and you know, the pressure's been released. It's fantastic.
Yeah, I've had moments like that where I've been in like meditation and my mind has still been busy. So that particular morning, I had a little extra time and I sat there for like an hour and a half. I'm like, why isn't this being fixed? And then as soon as I'm like, okay, cool, whatever. As soon as I got up and just started making breakfast, it was like this whoosh of, ah, of course it's fine. Like it was just, so it's kind of like trusting being in the space and the process as well. So I love that.
Yeah, so that's that like the opposites, isn't it? So in Eastern
Mm,
cultures, it's very much about just trusting the process, and in the
mhm.
West, we want all the proof. So, like you were
Yeah.
saying, you have to reference science all the time to so that people listen
Yeah.
and find a way into it, because we come from since we sort of separated from religion.
Mm.
Now we, from that
Very,
faith-based.
yeah,
Yeah,
very evidence-based.
yeah, we're very evidence-based. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
I just love that, like, because I feel like I operate in both quite naturally, because I find both interesting anyway, but I do love that, the things that we have always known, like, historically, not necessarily us individually, but like historically, we've always known what's maybe good for us and things, they've actually got science now to show that,
Yeah,
like the nature connection and why it shows why it does it, and it shows the impact on the brain, like, all of that. So that's pretty cool.
it is cool. Yeah.
Yeah. And where do you feel like there is room for improvement for your own kind of approach and practices?
Um, Maybe I don't know. I think I
Mm.
do practice quite
I think you do pretty well.
well. Yeah.
Like, I
Uh,
see you week after week show up for yoga, and I'm like, yep, you're in
maybe
it.
maybe more of that, everyday moment. Um, so sometimes, when you're under time pressure for a bunch of stuff,
Hi,
um,
yes, I
yeah,
get it.
that's when it can be. That's when you can, start to multitask and lose that attention, lose that focus that you have on what you're doing, and often you can't control that. So if there's other people in your life, like, I've got a family, so there's a partner and children around, and so they also have expectations and demands of you, and so I may plan my day, but then there'll be all these other incoming, and so
Yeah,
yeah, so that's going with the flow, isn't it? You just kind of have to
pretty
go with that,
much.
but sometimes that can be pretty, annoying. Yeah,
Annoying. No, I get it. Oh, I get it.
an interruption
Um,
of what you have planned.
yeah, you're like, I have a schedule. I've got my plan and it's in place, and I haven't scheduled this conversation in. Like, I get it. Okay, so last question for you. Where do you feel like there is room for improvement needed in society in general, in that area of mindfulness and mental
Yeah,
fitness?
it's interesting. A couple of my, like so many people that I know are having mental health issues or have mental illnesses.
Mm.
There's, and everyone's talking about the mental health crisis this year.
Hmm.
So
Finally,
yeah,
finally.
I know.
Yay.
Yeah, it's good that it's such an open conversation. It's
Mm,
great to see stigma lessening. This year, it's been really good to see a bunch of men who are not in sport talk about mental illness.
mm,
So I think it's happening. I think, this slow emerging is it's being taken more seriously. There's so much academic work around mindfulness and other mental fitness practices that I don't even think it's woo-woo anymore. A really
yeah.
great film that came out this year, a documentary by Shannon Harvey, is called My Year of Living Mindfully.
Mm,
And it's terrific because it's full of interviews with these, researchers from around the world, different mindfulness practices that they use, but also a personal journey for her. And her interest is that she has a quite a chronic autoimmune disease, and two small children. So she's looking for ways to improve her well-being.
mm.
So
I
um,
love that.
yeah, so when you see things like that, and they're just so good at explaining, the
Mm,
way things work. So for people who really need that evidence base, then there's a whole bunch of tools now that you can read or you can watch, and so you can be assured that what you're doing is going to work incrementally over
yeah.
time.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. You don't feel like you're just throwing stuff against the wall and seeing what sticks. You can actually be like, oh, this is what I'm doing because it feels this way, but also I know that it's doing this for me, which is
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ah, thank you so much. I love having conversations like that in general. So I'm so grateful that you were able to come on and have that conversation with me, but also bring your experience and your perspectives to it as well, because that's so important. Is there anywhere online that people can find out more information about you or Mindsettle?
Yeah, mindsettle.com. So
Mhm.
that's the website, and one of the tabs there is Mindsettle TV. So if you're interested in streaming those shorter films for yourself, there's a free 2-week trial on offer. So you can have a
Awesome.
look for yourself and see what you think, and send me some feedback. I'd love to hear what you think about it.
Great. Oh, thank you so much. I actually probably look at that now, but but no, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time and this whole conversation. So important. So I feel like it's just, if it acts as a little prompt, as a little reminder for just one person, then that's perfect. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jess. I really appreciate juicy conversations like this too. I love